what are your goals for your team playing high school sports? In other words, if you had 100 points, we encourage you to kind of think about what would I give points to? So, first of all, let's get an idea. What would you get the most points to? Let's get an idea. Throw out something.
Life lessons.
Okay, life lessons. Okay, scholarship, self-confidence, character. We'll talk about that. Teamwork. Okay, learning how to deal with defeat. Excellent. Anyone else? Sportsmanship. Excellent. All right. How many of you get points to having fun? Number one reason why they play sports is what? Have fun. How many of you gave points to winning? Okay. Curious. Now, I will say this. Right? Oftentimes, what we say is different what we do. In other words, we ask, how many of you give points to winning? Not very many of you raise your hand publicly. However, when we show up to the game, what do we have a tendency to focus on the most? The scoreboard. So we're just saying, be mindful of all the other goals that you have, that you said was more important. So once again, I'm just simply saying this. If you said that, I want my team to learn how to become a good teammate, if you notice during the competition, during the game, that your child encouraged another teammate, then that's something you want to point out. I noticed that one of your teammates made a mistake and you looked like you went over and said something to them. I'm curious what you said, because it looked like you were encouraging them. So reinforce what you said was important. We encourage you to kind of think about that, all right? Your team 100 points. So once again, we're saying be mindful of those. A little bit about Positive Coaching Alliance. We were founded in 1998 at Stanford University, and really our goal is to transform high school sports. In other words, we would just want to make sure that every student athlete not only has a positive experience, but most importantly, learn life lessons. Those things that's going to help them to be successful off the football field as well. Notice these are some of our great supporters and sponsors, and we're really excited about these companies helping to support our organization. Also, we have a list of our PTA National Advisory Board. In fact, Phil Jackson is actually our national spokesman. So we're really excited about these individuals embracing this message that we're sharing with you this morning, as well as advising our organization. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what we call our system approach. In other words, one of the things we say at Positive Coaching Alliance is this: when everyone understands their role and play their role, sports becomes such a positive experience for our student athletes. Now notice that the leaders in the organization, they're responsible for the culture of the organization. In other words, one of the things we say is the best definition for culture for PCA is the way we do things here. Everywhere you go, there's a culture for the way things are done. You have a culture in your home, you have a culture in your job, the athletic department has a culture, the school has a culture. Your child's individual team will have a team culture. So here's what we're simply saying. The leaders in the organization are responsible for the culture of the organization. Notice that the double goal coaches are what we call double goal coaches. First of all, the first goal of a double goal coach is to strive to win. Here's what we're simply saying. We're not an anti-competitive organization. We believe it's important to teach your child to go out and compete. Why? Because they're going to have to compete off the athletic field. But notice the second goal of a double goal coach is to what? Teach life lessons. Those two can coexist together. You can teach student athletes to strive to win and also what? Teach life lessons. But one of the things we say is that the life lesson is more important than the winning. Notice the parents. The parents are what we call second goal parents. In other words, here's what we encourage parents to do. You see that first goal, strive to win? We encourage you to leave that to who? The coaches and the kids. In other words, you have a more important job to do, and that's that second goal of teaching life lessons. Then finally, our student athletes are what we call triple impact competitors. Making themselves better, their teammates better, as well as making the game better. So what we're simply saying is this: when everyone understands their role and play their role, sports becomes such a positive experience for our student athletes. Right? We encourage you to focus on the big picture. In other words, the big picture is those life lessons. In other words, I always say this: when I was a kid growing up playing sports, in certain sports I rarely got an opportunity to play. In other words, I always say that talent is not obvious at an early age. Right? I still remember where I made this baseball team called the Mount Catholic Red Sox. Rarely got a chance to play. I went home. Once again, I'm 10 years old. I went home and I told my mother, I said, "Mom, I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. I go to practice every day. Coach doesn't give me an opportunity to play." Here's what my mother said: "You're not done. You're going to finish the year. If you decide that you want to play next year, that's fine." My mother taught me the value of completion. Everybody can start. Everybody can't finish. One of the hardest habits to break in life is quitting. Once you start quitting, then it becomes easy to quit. Here's what my mother really was saying: "Son, I'm not raising no quitter." Fathers, my dad came home, heard I wanted to quit. Different conversation. My father sat me down, and here's what he said. He said, "Son, don't ever forget this. Life is not fair." I'm 10! All I want to do is play some ball. Coach doesn't get an opportunity to play. My dad was defining adversity for me. How do I define adversity, especially for our student athletes? When things don't go the way they want them to go, or expect them to go. Research says that the average person experiences 27 adversities per day. From minor annoyances to major tragedies. Human nature normally responds to adversity one of four ways. One is blame. It's the coach's fault, it's the teacher's fault, it's the parent's fault, it's my peer fault. Or what? Deny. Third, escape. Your child's going through something, instead of talking to you, instead of talking to their coach, what do? Isolate themselves. Which leads to what? Depression, suicidal thoughts, drug and alcohol to numb the pain. Fourth, pity party. Woe is me. In other words, when my son was growing up, here's what I always told him. Anytime you experience some adversity, make sure you ask the right question. The wrong question is, why me? Because adversity normally has one or two goals. One is to teach them something about themselves, or two, to mature them, to grow them up in some areas. So I said, "Son, anytime I experience some adversity, what is the question? What is this trying to teach me? Or what area of my life is this adversity trying to grow me up in?" Because it has a goal. One thing I recognize is that I would not be standing here today if my mother would have jumped in and tried to fix everything for me. In other words, I'm just simply saying that, right? Avoid the urge to fix it. They're going to experience some adversity, but adversity has a goal. I always say that when you jump in and try to fix everything for them, here's what adversity normally does. That's okay. I'll be back when you're not around. Why? Because I have a goal. You know what I love about adversity? Right? I don't know if you ever heard this one. It is fair. Adversity don't care how much money you have. It doesn't care how much money you don't have. It doesn't care where you live. It doesn't care whether you're male. It doesn't care whether you're female. It doesn't care whether you're young. It doesn't care whether you're old. It's going to show up because it has a goal. So once again, I encourage you, right, to think about those values and life lessons, right? 70% of kids stop playing sports at age 13. Here's what we're simply saying. If your child is involved in high school sports, make sure they understand that it's not a right, it's a what? It's a privilege. In other words, right, your child grew up and 9 of their friends who grew up with them and only 2 others are playing high school sports for one reason or another. So I encourage you to make sure they understand that. But when you put that uniform on, don't forget it's not a right. It's a privilege. What happens when our kids see things as a right? What happens when they see things as a right? They take it for granted. In other words, I'm simply saying that, make sure you understand. You put that warrior uniform on, it's a privilege. What a privilege. It's your support that makes the difference. In other words, you know what I loved about high school sports? I love that when I showed up on campus and they talked about, competing, they had a rule. Here's what the rule was. You had to ride to the games on the bus with the team. And you had to ride back home on the bus. All right? Why did I love that so much? Because I didn't have to ride home with my dad. My dad would always engage in the post-game analysis. In other words, what were you thinking on that play? Right? What do you do? Right? Now, I will say this. My dad played ball, right? He knew the game, he had more wisdom, more knowledge, but when he consistently gave me advice, watch this, I often felt like my father was judging me. I didn't want to be judged by my father. I needed my father to be my father and not my judge. So I'm simply saying that when my son played high school sports, I tried to do it a little differently. In other words, right, I'm like any other father. Right? I wanted to see my son be successful. But we came up with some rules. In other words, here's what I told my son. Your dad will make time for you. If you want to work on your pitching, you want to work on your shooting, your dad will make time for you. But here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to be running behind you telling you we need to go to the batting cages. This is your thing, not my thing. It's his thing, not my thing. Right? After the game, right, on that ride home, I won't bring up the game unless what? Unless you bring it up. I won't give you any feedback unless what? Unless you ask. Once again, here's what was more important to me. Being his father and not his coach. Because I'm always be his father. So once again, I'm just simply saying that from my experience with my dad, I tried to do it a little differently. Right? So we're saying that your support makes a difference. You know what's tough sometimes? And I don't think we really pay attention to it. It's tough sometimes to love your child, watch this, unconditionally. Did you not know I see so many parents that express their love based on what? Conditions. I wanted my dad to hug me even if I didn't play well. Did y'all get that? I'm just simply saying that your support makes the difference, right? And I will say this. I've had some coaches say this. You know what? I got some kids who play for me. They don't even want their parent there. I'll be honest with you. Each and every time I hear this, I have to correct each and every one of those coaches. Every kid that plays sports wants their parent there. They just want to behave a certain way. But they do want them there. So once again, we're just simply saying that your support makes a difference. All right? Case study. Your daughter or son plays less than you like. You know he or she is better than the athlete who is playing more. As a second goal parent, what should you do? Any idea? What should you do? That kid is playing over your kid. And your child is better. Parent, what you gonna do? Sorry? Okay, encourage them to work hard. Anyone else?
I asked her how she felt she did.
I'm sorry?
I would ask her a question. How did you do today?
Okay, you ask her a question. How did she do today? Anyone else? Anything different? Okay, ask her if she's still enjoying it. Yes.
And then the reasoning the coach was saying that was it more than you. There's some other reason you're not aware of.
Okay, maybe it's some other reason you may not be aware of. All right. So once again, we're saying maintain your second goal focus, which is what? The life lesson. All right. Once again, someone said there may be other reasons why that child is playing over you. So once again, we encourage you to maintain that second goal focus. Now, these are 3 principles we talk about. The elm tree of mastery, feeling emotional tank, and honoring the game. First of all, 20 years of sports psychology research says this. If you can get your child to focus on the mastery definition of sports, they will actually be much more successful on the scoreboard. In other words, let's just say that your child competed, game's over. They walk into maybe the local restaurant, right? Maybe with their top on, their uniform on. Normally, what's the first question someone will ask them? Did you win? Did you win? The questions we ask reflect what we value. In other words, what's another question you can ask that child? Okay, how'd you do? What else? Did you have fun? Once again, I encourage you to think about what you gave the most points to. In other words, I noticed you competed today. Did you encourage your teammates? I noticed you competed today. Did you guys get behind any time during the game? How did you respond? Did you keep playing hard? Right. I noticed you competed today. Did you thank your coach? Did you respect the official? So I'm simply saying that that's another opportunity to use those values as teachable moments. Right? But here's why we'd ask that question. Did you win? First of all, we value winning. Right? Nothing wrong with that. But I will say this. Youth in high school sports is supposed to be educational. Professional sports is the other E, entertainment. It's a product. In other words, when we show up to a Giants game and there's a questionable call, right, the manager may run out and do what? Kick dirt, right? Here's what they're saying. You paid your money, now we're obligated to what? Entertain you. But here's what happens in our society. The media, ESPN, SportsCenter, they bombard our community with the win at all cost culture in professional sports. What happens sometimes is, as a society now, you have some coaches, some parents, even if some of our student athletes show up to high school sports with what? That win at all cost mentality. So I'm simply saying that, be mindful that high school sports is supposed to be educational. In other words, everything that we do, we're supposed to model for our student athletes how we want them to behave. So think about that. Scoreboard, first of all, it deals with what? Results. Bottom line, who wins, who loses. Right? But notice the mastery definition. It deals with what? Effort. So one of the things I want to encourage you to do is consistently talk to your child about what? About their effort. Right? So reinforce effort. They can't get their outcome until they first get what? The effort in. In other words, I do workshops with student athletes and I normally ask them, what are 3 goals you have? I have them write down an athletic goal, a team goal, and an individual goal. And normally what they write out is outcome goals. Right? They may say, I want to maintain a 3-5. So then I have them go back and say, well, what is that effort goal? And so I get them an idea. Well, here's your effort goal. I'm going to study for 2 hours a night. Now you can get your outcome. So once again, we're simply saying it's important to get your child to focus on the effort so they can reach their outcome. Scoreboard deals with comparison with others. So once again, as a high school student athlete, one of the things I remember is that I compared myself with other student athletes. But notice the mastery definition is focused now on learning. So once again, I encourage you to make sure that you ask those open-ended questions. In other words, when my son came home, I normally said, how was school? What would he say? Fine. Didn't get the information. So one day he came home and he said, fine. I said, wait. What are 2 things you learned at school today? From that day forward, when he walked through that door, here's what he knew. I was going to have to share 2 things I learned at school today. So once again, I'm just simply saying that the question we want to ask our kids is, what are 1 or 2 things you learned at practice today that's going to help you get better? Right? Then also, mistakes are not okay. Now, notice the mastery definition. It says, mistakes are okay. In other words, I like to reframe that. I think it's important for your child to play in an environment where they can go out and compete if they make a mistake, 2-step process. First of all, they learn from it. That's how they minimize it. Right? And then secondly, they're able to move on. Any